are talking about this right now. Allegedly, the Uncle Dennis.
Yeah. Uncle Dennis is no joke.
Was asking for a lot of stuff from the other teams. Houses, planes, sponsorship, guaranteed sponsorship money, just as an example. They're throwing this stuff out there. All of those things are supposedly illegal in a collective bargaining agreement. I have no idea whether this is true or not. I'm not trying to cast any aspersions on Uncle Dennis, but people in NBA circles are talking about this as we speak.
Stephen A., you called it over a year ago. The Clippers now confirming that the NBA is investigating tampering allegations made against them and Jerry West in their free agency recruitment of Kawhi Leonard in 2019. Kawhi has denied the allegations in his post-game comments from yesterday. Stephen A., what does this say about Kawhi?
Well, first of all, to address the reporting situation, as I highlighted on First Take nearly a year ago, I have no idea whether those things were true. What I was reporting was what was being said by other officials in the league, and that this would not go away because some of the things that was being requested and asked for were a bit exorbitant, to say the least. So obviously it's come to fruition, and that's what the NBA is investigating now, because a lot of people were making big stinks about that. Having said all of that, what does this say about Kawhi Leonard? Max, I hope you're sitting down when I say this, and I hope you completely understand where I'm coming from by the time I'm finished. But what this says is that Kawhi Leonard isn't worth it. Now, let me make sure that I'm specific with what I mean. Kawhi Leonard is a superstar basketball player. He's one of the top 5 players in the National Basketball Association. What he's capable of doing on both ends of the floor. Averaging 27 last year, being an elite defender. All of these things are true about Kawhi Leonard, and I don't mean to imply otherwise. But here's why I tell you he's not worth it. Because of what the Clippers gave up for him, he has to do more than that. When you give up a slew, like 5 first-round picks and, a couple of swaps and second rounders and all of this stuff, so folks can go and get Paul George because you mandated that was what needed to be done in order to get your services in a Clippers uniform, then you owe it to them not just to average points and rebounds and defend. You have to be that quintessential leader. You have to galvanize the troops and inspire others to be all they can be. You can't be a detriment, whereas you're making demands. You're engaging in load management. You practice when you want. You play when you want. The minutes you dictate. And the word that is prominently associated with you is indifference. Not when it comes to your specific play, but when it comes to those other ancillary things that inspire and contribute to a winning culture. You can't be distant and apart and apathetic to that. You have to embrace that wholeheartedly, because that's what you need to do when you've made the demands that you've made. Yeah, the Clippers didn't have to do it, and we understand that, but they did it for you. They did it because you said you were only coming if those conditions were met. Get me Paul George. And so that's where it all comes in. If you just signed for money, Max, and you decided to come there because they offered you the max and you wanted to be back in LA near your home and all of that other stuff, none of this applies. But when you hold them hostage, essentially, to get the player, this one specific player that you wanted with you, even if they had to mortgage the house and arguably their future to do so, then you owe them more than 27-7 a game and being a great player and an elite defender. You owe it to them to do everything you can as a leader to galvanize the troops and bring everything together so you can develop and ultimately help sustain a winning culture. He hasn't done that part yet. And that's why I say at the moment, he hasn't been worth it.
What does this say about Kawhi Leonard? We'll get to that in 1 second. First, Stephen A., Jerry West presided over, he was the executive for the Showtime Lakers. That man later got Shaq and Kobe. Jerry West was running around telling people when Kobe was still 17, he's going to be the greatest player of all time. but I'll deny it if you ever tell
One of
anyone
the
I
greatest.
said that, right? Yeah,
He said one of them.
and then I think he said greatest. I didn't hear that firsthand, but that came back to me. He said greatest, but maybe you're right.
Well, he told me one of.
And
he told me one of. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that's firsthand, and then gets Kawhi, and people are crying about tampering. Nerds, why don't you go get Shaq and Kobe
Hold on,
and
Max.
Kawhi? Now, in terms of
Max, he helped get KD to go to state. He helped get KD to go to state.
Right. Crying about
Jerry West.
tampering. Look, I know, like,
Jerry
you
West.
can question ethics and say, well, you have to play by the rules. I get it, but like crying about tampering is like that's the kind of nerd that the light is red. You're a pedestrian at the crosswalk. There's no traffic coming. It's the middle of the night, and you wait there until it turns green, right? Like I can't. Some people are they can't be helped. Look. Kawhi is worth it, Stephen A. If you wanted to say he wasn't worth it, I don't think that's even the best argument. The best argument is he made the mortgage of the future for Paul George. But even then, I would say it's worth it. Because if you're the Clippers and you see what they're putting together with the Lakers, and your window looks like it's already shut to try to win fans in that town, because for years the Lakers stunk until Jeannie Buss wrestled control of the organization, and 3 years later they won the chip. And the Clippers had Blake Griffin and Lob City with Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan and all that, and still they couldn't get it done. They couldn't even get to a conference finals. So if you're Steve Ballmer, you're like, Kawhi Leonard has been the best player on 2 championship teams. I know you could argue, no, it was Tim Duncan or Ginobili, or maybe not Parker by that point in 2014, but I think they were all about the same. And when you looked at the trajectory of where they were heading, there's a reason Kawhi not only guarded LeBron, but by the end of that series was dropping like 20 a game. He didn't average it for the series, but I'd say overall he's probably their best player at that point. He got Finals MVP. And he got Finals MVP in Toronto too, and was clearly their best player. And you could say, well, KD didn't get hurt. Well, if KD didn't get hurt, no one, LeBron James wouldn't have beaten the Warriors. He couldn't for 2 years. They got squashed by that Warriors team. Of course that's true. And you want to argue Clay, I don't know. I can't prove a counterfactual, Stephen A. I think the Raptors would have won. You think the Warriors would have won. But the Raptors did win. That's best player, arguably, at least, on 2 championship teams. And anyway, 2-time Finals MVP. So no, he doesn't lead the way you're discussing, right? But there's a difference between that and a guy who, say, over dribbles or throws teammates under the bus in the press. Kawhi ain't doing that. Kawhi's playing the way a teammate would want him to play. He's just not, as you would say, galvanizing the troops. To me, that's still worth it. If that guy's going to go out and ball and make the team better, not hog the ball and stuff like that, and play good team basketball, I'm good.
Well, first of all, I think you're wrong, but understand, not only is he not galvanizing, but he is dividing indirectly, because if you take into account the beef between Montrezl Harrell and Paul George, assuming there's truth to that, which obviously I've heard, well, where would that stuff with Paul George come from in terms of how Paul George and Kawhi Leonard was being treated? Remember, Kawhi Leonard was a 2-time NBA champion. He was a 2-time NBA Finals MVP. But Paul George was receiving similar treatment, even though he had never even been to the finals, let alone capture 2 championships and 2 NBA Finals MVP. So where would that come from? It would feed off of Kawhi Leonard, because Kawhi Leonard made Paul George's arrival a condition upon him arriving with the Los Angeles Clippers. See, this is where the accountability comes into play. Again, if I'm sitting up there and I'm a marquee free agent and I tell you this is what I want in terms of money, all right, okay, I'm good. But when I sit up there and I say, not only do I want this money, not only do I want these perks, but I don't give a damn what you have to do, get that guy too. And I do that, then there's a level of culpability and accountability that I have.
Not hog the ball and stuff like that, and play good team basketball, I'm good.
Well, first of all, I think you're wrong, but understand, not only is he not galvanizing, but he is dividing indirectly, because if you take into account the beef between Montrezl Harrell and Paul George, assuming there's truth to that, which obviously I've heard, well, where would that stuff with Paul George come from in terms of how Paul George and Kawhi Leonard was being treated? Remember, Kawhi Leonard was a 2-time NBA champion. He was a 2-time NBA Finals MVP. But Paul George was receiving similar treatment, even though he had never even been to the finals, let alone capture 2 championships and 2 NBA Finals MVP. So where would that come from? It would feed off of Kawhi Leonard, because Kawhi Leonard made Paul George's arrival a condition upon him arriving with the Los Angeles Clippers. See, this is where the accountability comes into play. Again, if I'm sitting up there and I'm a marquee free agent and I tell you this is what I want in terms of money, all right, okay, I'm good. But when I sit up there and I say, not only do I want this money, not only do I want these perks, but I don't give a damn what you have to do. Get that guy too. And I do that, then there's a level of culpability and accountability that I have.